Last week we discussed the teaching of the four levels, which was a model of how the one consciousness manifests as a creation in time and space, and how we all fit in and our individuality in relation to that model. And by the end of it, Raoul was having an existential crisis and wasn't sure whether he existed or not. But he looks fairly solid to me. So.
Well, I've just been to a Nietzsche module.
Okay.
That wasn't very helpful.
But this week, we're going to look at the symbolism of the Mukabele, because I try not to jump straight in on that, because you just need some groundwork in the meantime to sort of understand the basic principles that underlie it. So we've done that now. And then next week will be your final meeting here, because your classes will get longer and longer. So, symbolism of the Mukabele. As I said before, the whole of the knowledge contained in the Mevlevi tradition is contained within the turning ceremony, and it's a way to experience it directly for yourself, and then it comes out in your own way. But I'll explain what the different bits of it mean, and that's quite helpful when you're turning. But the whole thing begins, the ceremony actually begins when you wash your feet, and before every Mukabele and every practice and every session, you wash your feet in the basins in the changing room. And that's almost, it's like at that point the ceremony begins. So you've come in off the street, and it's part of the preparation before you turn, because you need to almost drop the outside life, and that often takes a bit of time. So you can't rush straight in and up the stairs and into the top studio and into a Mukabele. You have to do a bit of letting go first. So never forget to wash your feet, because that's the start of the ceremony. And if I forget anything, Helen, you chip in. So, as you know, then you dress, and the dervishes take their robes and all meet up in the east studio up there, and we do the robing up there. And I'll explain the significance of the robes a bit later on when I'm sort of covering bits of the ceremony. But after you've robed, the dervishes all file up the staircase. The sheikh leads the procession, and technically the dervishes' order in the line is in relation to how long they've been a turner for. I hate the word seniority, because no one's really more senior than anyone else. Everyone's totally equal. But initially, when you've just learned, Helen will muddle you all up with older turners, because you'll all be very new to it. And then it's good to be between two older turners, because they'll sort of steady you. But later on, there's a sort of age that you've been doing it for order. And then we file up to the landing outside the top studio, and the place you're turning is known as a semahane, which, as you know, is a circular space like that. And the semahane, as I've mentioned, is divided by this invisible centre line, and normally only the sheikh is allowed to walk along the centre line or sit on the centre line. But when you bow in across the centre line, and you bow to the picture which is above the red sheepskin, and the picture says Ya Hazreti Mevlana, may God keep his secret. And so you do your dervish bow with your sealed toes and your hand on your heart. And although in your training you're bowing very deeply, in the ceremony your bows are actually quite shallow. Mr. Ezui, when he first taught it to us, wasn't impressed by great deep bows. He thought they were a bit ostentatious, so you do quite a modest bow, because dervishes are meant to be very modest, humble people. And that act of bowing into the room is known as Bash Kazmak. And Bash Kazmak literally translates as chopping off the head. And what that symbolises is that as you enter the Samahani, you're chopping off your head, so you're chopping off both your discursive mind and you're chopping off your identity of I am something. So you're letting go of your identity in the world. So it's almost like you're becoming empty. So that's where we had the symbolism of I am something, I am nothing. In that act of bowing in, you're no longer an I am something. You're an I am nothing. And in order to be filled with the breath of God, you have to become like a hollow vehicle or a hollow vessel. And there's a wonderful Zen teaching story, which I adore, about a learned professor who went to see a Zen master, and he asked the Zen master if he'd explain Zen to him. So the Zen master offered him a cup of tea. Well, he offered him a teacup, and then he started pouring the tea in. And he just kept on pouring and pouring, and soon all the tea was overflowing, and he went on pouring. And the professor said, "Stop, stop, the tea is overflowing." And the Zen master said, like this teacup, you are so full of your own opinions, but I can't possibly teach you Zen. You first have to empty your cup. And I think that's a wonderful story, and it's very significant in relation to this training and this practice. Because as Helen will vouch, we sometimes have people who come along who it's actually impossible to teach or train because there's no room for anything, is there? They already think they know it all. Yeah. So you even had some says you don't need to teach me, I can already do it. So first of all, like when you do the Baz Kazmak, you have to be able to empty your cup completely and become like a hollow vessel. So I love that, the letting go of I am something and becoming I am nothing. And then when the dervishes file round, you'll be learning all this fairly soon, onto the red carpet. And then the sheikh, whoever's playing the role of sheikh, comes in. And they again look at the calligraphy and bow. And then the sheikh does a faltering step across the room. And that step, which you'll also be doing, represents both movement and stillness. So between each activity, it's like there's this moment of total stillness. So it's like a gap between activity and between desires, where you become aware of the underlying nature of reality, which is total stillness. So the sheikh does his faltering step across to the red sheepskin, which someone tells me is actually a goat skin. And we've already discussed the symbolism of the redness. And then the sheikh bows, and all the dervishes bow as well. And then the sheikh goes down and kisses the floor, and all the dervishes go down and kiss the floor. And at this point, everyone's wrapped up in their hurkas, which is the black cloak that you wear. And the black coat actually symbolises your tomb. So what that's really symbolic of is it's like, in one metaphorical sense, in the waking state, you're symbolically already dead. And then when you come into the awakened state, then you wake up and become alive. So it's like all the dervishes are wearing their hurkas or their tombs. And the sikhi, your pointed hat, represents your gravestone, so it's like you're already dead. And you'll see in Turkey, in the Mevlevi graveyards, where dervishes who are buried have their tombstone is sort of often carved in the shape of a sikhi. You can see them in Island of Rhodes as well, and sikhis on gravestones in Greece. So then the dervishes go and kiss the floor, and it's very important you keep your hurka well wrapped about you, because underneath your hurka is your dervish robe or tenure, and your tenure literally translates as oven. And very shortly you'll be understanding at first hand why it's called an oven. But it also, as well as getting very hot in it, it's the thing you get cooked. It cooks and dissolves your sense of being a separate self. So that's your tenure, is your robe, and it's an oven. And boy, is it an oven. And then, after you've kissed the floor, then the dervishes all settle down in the listening position. And so with the listening position, you're actually sort of metaphorically again looking into your heart. And your heart, although it's sort of your physical heart, it represents your still centre. So there's a bit where Rumi talks about the heart somewhere, because the heart isn't something individual inside you. Rumi says, the heart is not contained in hundreds of thousands of persons, noble or common. It is in a single one. Which is he, which? Leave what is only a fragment of the heart, and seek the perfect heart, in order that by means of it, that fragment may become as a mountain. The perfect heart is encompassing the whole of this realm of existence, and scattering gold and beneficence and bounty. That's Rumi from the Mevlevi. So what the heart represents is your still centre, which, as we've already discovered earlier, is the centre of everything. So everything, what? Yeah, everything is contained within the heart. So I find that a wonderful thing. So that again is your still centre is everyone else's still centre. There aren't 2 or 500 billion still centres, there's only one still centre. And everyone and everything is that still centre, and everything is contained within it. So then you listen to a prayer which is called the Naat, and sometimes we have it sung live if we've got live musicians. Other times, if we've got a recording, it's recorded. And there's 2 versions of it. There's a very long full version, or there's a shorter version. Mr. Rezui wanted us to have the longer version, but most of our recordings have the shorter version. And that's just him singing the praises of the Prophet Muhammad and Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi and his teacher Shams of Tabriz. So, and there are certain points in that where you bow when you hear the names Ya Hazreti Mevlana and Muhammad Mustafa and Shamsuddin Tabrizi. But Helen will teach you all that shortly, the points in which you bow. And you bow for the full length of the name. So Ya Hazreti Mevlana, then you come up at the end of it. And all of this is really, again, it's a preparation for turning. So it's helping you drop off the outside world and the busy day you've just come in from. Because you may have been a busy dervish working in the marketplace or weaving carpets or something, or herding camels, whatever it is dervishes do in the desert. and then you need to drop all that off. And then after the naat, there's a nay taksim, and the nay, as you know, is a hollow reed, and it's very haunting, and the nay is really longing for its origins in the reed bed. And there's another lovely bit from the Mevlevi. Yeah, here we are. This is actually how the Mevlevi opens. Listen to the reed, how it tells a tale complaining of separation, saying, "Ever since I was parted from the reed bed, my lament have caused man and woman to moan. I want a bosom torn by severance, that I may unfold the pain of love desire. Everyone who is left far from his source wishes back the time when he was united with it." And that's how the Mevlevi opens. And that's a wonderful verse, because we all have this memory of the unified state from which what we've come from. And this memory of the unity, it's like a distant memory, but there's something missing. Because for the purpose of manifestation, in order for there to be a whole drama of creation, you have to have this divine hypnosis and forget your true identity. And the forgetting of your true identity is a necessary part of the dance of creation. So it's not a terrible accident which has happened. I think in the Christian Bible and in the Jewish one, they've rather got into this idea of original sin and falling from grace. But I think all of that is a misunderstanding of the metaphor. So the Garden of Eden is just a metaphorical reference to the state of total unity. And then in that story they eat the tree of the apple from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then they start to see everything as separate and divided, which is part of the dance. But again, part of that process eventually is the return back into the garden, which is what all mystical traditions are about, which isn't going into a literal garden. It's about returning back into the state of total unity, where you no longer see things as separate and divided. Okay, that's just a little detour I'm having. So that's the naat. The naat is very beautiful, not the naat, the nay taksim. It's very beautiful and very haunting. And at the end of the nay taksim, there's a loud drum beat, which is called kun, K-U-N, and I think in Arabic that means get up, but in our tradition it means wake up and be. And all the dervishes on the drum beat hit the floor together. So when you're watching the Macabre, you see all the dervishes suddenly hit the floor, and that's kun. So that means wake up and be. And waking up again is coming out of the state of I am a separate identity into the awareness of your true being, which is the universal. So I think that's a magnificent moment in the Macabre when everyone hits the floor together. And it's really important to be awake through the ceremony, so we do all hit it together, and you don't get a sort of Mexican wave of the dervishes hitting the floor like at a football match.
It also means, kun means also being.
Being. Good, I thought you would know.
Yeah.
That's magnificent, being. I love the concept of being, I always have. Because knowledge sort of comes and goes, but being's always there. So then the dervishes get up and they all bow with a sheikh, and the sheikh sets off leading them in a procession around the circle. And remember, that's called the post where the red sheepskin is, and you've got the picture above of Yah Hazreti Mevlana, may God keep his secret. And the sheikh does this faltering step leading off, and he's showing the dervishes all of manifested creation. And the first half of the circle is the outflow from one to many. So in creation you have the one undifferentiated self, the one mind, as we saw here it is, and it manifests itself as a creation in time and space. So that in Taoism they call that the one mind manifests as the 10,000 things. So the whole multiplicity of creation is represented by the outflow. And then at a certain point there's what's known, in this case when you cross the centre line, there's what's known as the return to source. And that's the many, the multiplicity going back into oneness. So you can take that cycle on so many different levels. You can have it as a lifetime if you like. And in our next meeting, our final one, I'll deal with that more as the circle of life. But that's the symbolism. So the dervishes is showing you all of the sheikhs showing you manifested creation, then the outflow and the return back into oneness. Because, as I've said before, when you read people's near-death experiences, at death, life in the world, all your passions and things start to fall away, and you start to see reunited. So it's like, it's sometimes said, you go cosmic. It's like your bottle of separation breaks and you expand outwards, which apparently is an unbelievable experience. It's where you've always actually been in your deepest self, but it's a return to your true home and what you've always wanted but didn't know it. So, as for dervishes, each individual dervish crosses the red carpet. They turn back and they look into the eyes of the dervish behind them and in front of them, and they bow across the skin. And then you look into the eyes again, and then you turn around and move on. And that's really the whole meaning of the word Mukabele, which translates as coming face to face. So what you're doing is you're seeing the light of God in the eyes of the other dervish. Your true I am is acknowledging the true I am of the dervish you're bowing to, and then you're bowing to that with your hand on your heart, and then you stand up, look again, then you move on and carry on with the faltering step. And that's for me, that's a magnificent moment, that bowing across the skin. It's almost like sometimes like this sort of love thing sort of ripples down the line at that point. Unless you've got a grumpy dervish you bow to. But there aren't too many of them. So that's the meaning of Mukabele, bowing across the skin. And then you take very quick steps across, and then you turn and bow to the dervish who's behind you, and so it goes on. And the sheikh leads the dervishes on 3 rounds, and when you cross the centre line here, where the door is, you stop and you bow, and then you come up and you carry on processing. So you bow to the dervish behind and in front of you there, you just bow across the skin, across the door there, you're bowing across, you're acknowledging the centre line. And there are 3 rounds of processing, and the first round is knowledge gained from books, so it represents 3 types of knowledge, doesn't it? First is books. Second, so that's like Mr. Esri said, that's like reading about London. And the second one is like coming to visit London. on holiday. So you've heard about London, you've read about London. Second round is you come and visit London, so you get a bit of direct experience. And the third round is you actually come and live in London. So that's what's called living in the reality of that. So it's knowledge from reading, knowledge from seeing, and knowledge from direct experience. And when it's direct experience, it's your own knowledge and it comes out in your own words. So that's very nice, the threefold symbolism. And then at the end of the third round of processing, you'll notice the shape starts to hold back round about here, and a gap opens up between the sheikh and the last dervish. And the last dervish, when they reach the sheepskin, they bow to the infinite, so they bow to the empty space. So that's a bit like bowing to the void. And then the music fades out, the processing music, and then the sheikh hurries round back to the post, no longer doing a faltering step, and all the turners hurry round too. And you only, as you cross the centre line here, you just, without stopping, you nod your head as you pass, if you're that side of it. So Helen will remind you of that, but you don't stop, you just keep walking, but just make a nod of the head to acknowledge it. And then you all queue up on the red carpet here, and as that's happening, there's another nay taksim, and you're all lined up here. And then suddenly all the instrumental music and choir begins, so the actual turning music starts at that point. And at that point, on the first beat, you'll have seen all the dervishes lift off their hurkas, or their black cloaks, and they kiss them, and then they drop them on the floor behind them. And again, it's very important to get that all together, because a lot of the impact of Macabre is, from one level, it's like an amazing work of art, and it's very sort of precisely choreographed, so the effect on the audience is very important. So you've seen all these dervishes in black, and if you've been good dervishes, you've shown no sign at all of your robes underneath, and there isn't a little glimmer of your robes under your hurka if you get the right size hurka. And suddenly you take off your black robe and you've got this whole line of completely white dervishes. So to get that right is important, because it's part of the beauty of the Mukabele. And then the sheikh bows, the dervishes all bow, and the Semas and Bashi, who stand in there, comes out forward and bows at kisses the sheikh's hand. The sheikh puts their hand out first, and the Semas and Bashi kisses the hand, and the sheikh kisses the sikhi or hat of the Semas and Bashi. And the Semas and Bashi is asking permission to turn in the ceremony. And this is quite important, because in the Mevlevi tradition, no one has permission to turn until the sheikh grants it. So if you want to turn inside or outside of the teke in the tradition, you have to get permission of the sheikh, because that's how the tradition is. So in the ceremony, when the dervishes bow through, they bow, and then they come up, the sheikh's hand is just there, and they kiss the sheikh's hand, and in kissing each dervish's sikhi, the sheikh is granting them permission to turn in the ceremony. And then, as you've seen, the dervishes open out, they go past the sheikh and the Semas and Bashi, and they turn out into the Semahani, and they open up sort of like a flower blossoming, and the robe comes out. And the Semas and Bashi will indicate with their foot whether you go in the outer circle or whether you go into the inner circle. But Helen will explain all that later in your training when you get there. So if the Samazambashi does nothing, you just carry straight on and follow a course round the outer circle. If the Samazambashi just puts a foot out like that as you're bowing, then you know to turn into the inner circle. And it's lovely when the whole room's filled up, you've got all the dervishes turning, and then you've got the dervishes following a path in the inner circle. And the first dervish out beetles around the room as quick as they can, and because you don't want to create a traffic jam back here by a really slow dervish still sort of turning there and no one can get out. So the Samazambashi is like a dervish traffic warden. So it's really important you give up your technique to bolt round the room, and you don't go, you get to there and you stop. You don't cross the centre line until every dervish in the line is out. And the Samazambashi then bows to the sheikh, and then if there's space beyond that, then you can turn across the centre line. And one thing Helen will rub in as it goes on is you never turn on the centre line on place. So you always wait till there's a space the other side of the centre line, and then you move across quickly. So you never turn in front of a sheikh on a sort of static position. And also you're always told in the tradition you have to make a special effort with your arms as you pass the sheikh. So you're turning here, then you see a space becomes available, so you nip across, but you put your arms up higher, and then, because you might be getting very tired and your arms are getting a bit near the horizontal at that point, some of them anyway. So the salams, they're divided up, the periods of turning are called salams, and the first salam represents what's known as shariat or sharia, and in the Islamic religion that really represents sort of the law. So it's more, I'm told shariat means, to Sufis actually means on the skin, so it's like the most external level of religion. So in all sorts of different religions, whichever religion you come from, or even if it's no religion at all, you have these different laws and rules. So in the one I come from, which is Christianity, there are various sort of 10 commandments and other things. And that's all part of shariat or religion. So that's sort of what you might call exoteric religion, or the most external aspect of religion, shariat. So then that proceeds for a certain amount of time, usually around about 10 minutes, I think. How long have they had their arms up for so far?
I think that first salam is about 8 or 9 minutes.
8 or 9 minutes, yeah.
We did it today.
Okay, so you've nearly done it. First salam. And then the music changes, and Helen will let you know when that happens, and you all stop and you bunch together in little groups, and the sheikh comes out and bows 3 times. No, 3 times, he does 2 steps. 3 times to mark the salam, and for each salam he'll take, the first salam he takes 1 step out and bows, the next one 2 steps, the next one 3 steps, and the last one 4 steps and bows, and then steps back again. So there are 3 bows, and then again the dervishes file round, and the Samazambashi indicates when the first dervish is to come forward, and then you all bow out again, and there'll be a different combination of people in the outer and the inner circles. And the second salam represents what's known as tariqat or tariqa, and a tariqat is really a way. It's like in your journey of life, as we've already discussed in other diagrams, at a certain point you get a bit fed up of the cycle of pleasure and pain, which you get being an ego in the journey of life. So you start to think there must be something more, and you've also got this distant memory of the state of total unity, the unified state. And that starts to drive your search. So you start to look for something, and normally you've looked outside, so then you start to look inside into your own still centre. And so that's like finding a teacher and a way or a path. So Tarika is like a way or a path. So I love that. So you've had conventional outer religion, and then the next salam, second salam, which is very short, represents Tarika, or finding a way. So that's fantastic. I love the second salam. It's so short, you haven't got time to get tired. The first one's great because you've got quite a lot of energy because you've only just started turning. The second one, you're a bit tired, but it's so short you've hardly got going when it's ended. In some of the Macabres I used to do in the early 70s, there were so many of us turning, you actually sometimes never got past out in the second one. You were still lined up and the music had ended before you made it out. So then you were out early in the third salam. So we've had Shariat, Tarikat, and the next salam is the third one, is known as Hafikat. And the third salam is the longest salam. It's very long, and you're already quite tired. So what it really is, it's like total surrender and annihilation in the beloved. He's got the right idea. So, in order to get through the third salam, it's like you're being well and truly cooked within your tenure, and you have to get through it. You have to hand over to something bigger than yourself. And there's a wonderful poem about that. And it's by an American poet called Robert Bly. And he says, "We did not come to remain whole. We came to lose our leaves like the trees that are broken, and start again, drawing up from the great roots." I love that, because you sort of set out on your journey, all sort of full of energy and all the things you're going to do. And then the way your life path actually goes isn't at all how you expect it to go. And then you often have all these traumas and things fall apart. And all of that brings you to the realization that you can't do this journey under your own steam. You have to hand over to something much larger than yourself as a separate entity. So Hafikat, I love Hafikat, because I love that whole idea of just you have to let go. In the Alcoholics Anonymous organisation and other similar organisations, they have a saying which is let go, let God. So when you're really up against it and you don't know what to do and you can't go on, you just do this total handing over and total letting go. And that tends to happen in the third salam very often, because you've been out on the floor for quite some time now and your arms are getting tired. And you're going to be discovering that all at first hand very shortly. Rumi has his way of saying it. He says, "How should a rock be covered with verdure by the spring? Become earth, that thou mayest grow flowers of many a hue. Years hast thou been a heart-jagging rock. Once, for the sake of experiment, be earth." So he's almost saying, rather than being hard and rigid, become soft and receptive, surrender, give up trying to control everything, and let go and let God. So that's the magnificence of the third salam. And eventually that ends, and again dervishes bunch together and bow and file round. And when that salam ends, you remember exactly where you were in the turning circle. Because in the next salam, Helen or the Samazambashi isn't going to put their foot out to indicate where you should go to. You remember where you were at the end of the third salam, and as you bow through for the fourth and final salam, you make your way to the place where you ended the third salam. And when you get there, you cease circling the room. On the first three salams, the dervishes have been rotating in a circle around the room. And when the fourth salam, you get back to your place and you just turn on spot. And that's known as marifa or marifat. And that's when, before you've been travelling, you've been looking for something. At this point in the process, you realise that you already are the thing you've been looking for, and you've actually had it all along. So there's no longer any need for a journey and for searching, because you are the thing you were looking for. So you just turn around yourself on one spot. So that's very important, part of marifat or marifa. It's you're coming fully into your own knowledge, and you've realised that all along what you were looking for was your own true nature, and it was already fully formed, looking out through your eyes, and you just had to go on this journey of life like the man from Baghdad to Cairo and back again, to find that you already had the great treasure that you were looking for. And meanwhile, the sheikh has always been on the perimeter, observing without comment the changing dance. And what that represents is, in Indian philosophy, they call it Purusha and Prakriti. It's also symbolized by Shiva and Parvati in Hindu mythology. And the sheikh here represents the still, unmanifest consciousness, and the whole of the dance represents the manifest universe, subject to space and time and everything else. So the sheikh represents the still underlying consciousness, and the dance is the manifestation. In Indian philosophy they call the stillness Purusha and the manifestation Prakriti. And you often in Indian art you get here's Shiva dancing here. But you get other images of Shiva as an inert corpse, and then Kali, which represents his feminine aspect, or the manifestation, and dancing on the corpse. So that's exactly the same symbolism as the sheikh and the manifest Mukabele. And they call that in Indian philosophy Purusha and Prakriti. So it's also in Western philosophy called Pneuma and Pheneuma, phenomena and pneuma. So it's like the underlying stillness, the great stillness, the one mind, the one consciousness, and its manifestation in time and space. So Macabre is like this marvellous dance of creation and of manifestation and of your individual life. And then in the fourth salam, the sheikh bows and he moves out, slow turning, or he or she moves out, slow turning along the centre line, and turns in the middle of the Macabre, with all the turners turning around. So he slow turns, And the Samazambashi then takes the place of a sheikh standing on the skin and holding the stillness, because the role of the sheikh is really to hold the stillness while the turners turn. And the sheikh coming out represents the fact that the underlying stillness and the dance are not two. So the manifest creation isn't separate from the underlying stillness. It is not only the manifestation of consciousness, but it is the very substance of consciousness itself. So it's like wherever you look, you see his face. I think Rumi quotes the Quran saying, wheresoever you look, his face is there. So that symbolises the fact that everything is oneness. So that's the non-duality. And that again for me is a magnificent symbolism. So you've got this first, the sheikh as the silent impartial witness, and as the sheikh it's important you don't judge the turners, you just love them and you witness the ceremony. And if you see someone struggling, and having turned out there in that circle myself for about 30 years, I know what it's like to struggle out there. More love goes out to them, and you're just sort of willing them on because you know what it's like. And then you can see when someone's in sort of having a total bliss experience, it shows. And then eventually the fourth salam ends, and it ends with, it'll either be recorded or live, is the singing of the Quran, and particular verses are sung, and the Quran singer can choose themselves which verses. And the minute the Quran starts being sung, the dervishes all go down immediately and kiss the floor and stop turning. So that's instant. And our friend George Masri, who I call Georgie Bey, was our chief Quran singer because his Arabic was so good. And we've got one or two other very good Quran singers as well, or if not, we'll have a recording on the end of the Macabre music. So the dervishes go down, but you don't slump on the floor. In your training, I notice it hasn't happened to you lot yet, if you haven't got there, but a lot of dervishes just sort of slump. But you actually sit upright in your kneeling position, looking into your heart. You remain very attentive all through it, however tired you might be. And at that point, the Samazambashi will pick one or two dervishes from around here, and they go around with the Samazambashi, and they drop the hurkas back on the individual dervishes who are sitting there quietly. And what the symbolism of the Quran is at that point, actually I jumped forward slightly. At the end of the fourth salam, the instrumental music with the drum beat stops at a certain point, and then you just have a solo nay at the end. And the significance of the solo nay is that it's calling you back into life. It's calling you've gone on this amazing journey, and the nay solo, while you're still turning, is calling you back into daily life. It's sort of saying you've gone into this wonderful state, but you have to return into life, taking the great secret with you, and you have to manifest that secret in daily life. And then the Quran starts. And the significance of the Quran is again that it's almost like you're going backwards in the process now. So you're going back to Shariat. You're going back, you've gone inwards, and now you're sort of going back out again, ready to rejoin life as a very loving dervish. So the Quran goes on, and then the Quran ends, and then the Samazambashi kisses the floor, comes round and stands in front of the sheikh and looks up at the picture and says what's known as the Samazambashi's prayer, which is really a history of the tradition and the different sheikhs from Mevlana and Shams of Tabriz, and other sheikhs get mentioned, and Sultan Veled, who was Rumi's son. And one thing I didn't mention, that the processing walk is actually known as the Sultan Veled walk, because it was introduced by Rumi's son, Sultan Veled. So the ceremony was virtually sort of within a generation of Rumi is being in the form we have it now. So the Samazambashi's prayer, and again there are certain points where you bow down and certain points where you come up again. You particularly bow down again on Muhammad Mustafa, then you stay down for a whole lot of the different sheikhs and holy people, then later on you come up. And the Samazambashi prays for the liberation of the sheikh of his teke and the liberation of all the dervishes in this teke. I think there's a translation of it in this little booklet that we produced.
And it also mentions the dancing ecstasy of immortal bliss.
Yeah, we remember those who have fallen in the dancing ecstasy of immortal bliss, which is a phrase I particularly like. The idea of falling in the dancing ecstasy of immortal bliss. And then he says, let us say the Fatiha, doesn't he? And the Sheikh very quietly does this prayer from the Quran, and then the Samazambashi does the final prayers, and then the Samazambashi kneels back down. And then when the Sheikh kisses the floor, then all the other dervishes kiss the floor, and everyone quietly files round. Again, when you're crossing the centre line here by the door, you don't stop, but you just do a moving bow. And then the Sheikh, all the dervishes are back on the skin, and the Sheikh does a final quite loud prayer which ends with let us call who, and all the dervishes in unison call who. It's a very beautiful moment. And who is all the names of God rolled up into one, isn't it? And then the Sheikh says Assalamu alaikum, and the Sheikh then does a faltering step out. If there's a band of musicians here, the Sheikh will stop in the middle and say Assalamu alaikum again, which will be answered by the I think the head drummer. Nazambashi. I'm not sure. And then they go out and the Sheikh bows, everyone bows, and then the Samazambashi leads the way out, and then all the dervishes follow, and you all bow out of the room. You look at the picture, hand on heart, bow across your toes, and then you go off down the stairs where you take off your robes down in the E-studio, and then you go down to the changing room and shower or whatever. And Mr. Ezui always emphasised that once the Macabre is over, then you're back into life, and you don't carry on in a sort of holy mode. But he said then you have a party. So that's why we have food and stuff in there, and sometimes music in here. You're going out into normal life, and you don't. In normal life, you take what you've learnt in the Mukabele. So, for instance, if you're in the processing or if you're turning, you don't get annoyed if a dervish in front of you is turning a bit too slowly for your liking. You always give space to the dervish in front of you, so you always love your fellow dervish. That's part of the practice. So when you're in life and you're behind a slow driver, you don't then start popping your horn at them, because you picture them as a fellow dervish, so you show them love and compassion. So that's really how it carries out into life. And the whole thing about looking the same is some dervishes who have been abroad have been given these huge great robes they've got in Turkey, much bigger than ours, and said, can I wear my special robe? And I say, no, you can't, because you'll stand out from the other dervishes. The whole point of this is you lose your individual identity. So no one stands out as being special, because you're all part of a total oneness, and it's all about transcending your individuality for the duration of the ceremony. And we have had dervishes who have gone on to sort of try and teach it without permission and set up internet identities as being very special dervishes, and that in a way saddens me, because it shows they've missed the point of what the whole Mukabele was about, because it's not about being the most special dervish or the most holy dervish or even the dervish with the highest arms, because as Mr. Esri said, dervishes are very humble people, because you know that you yourself are just a vehicle for consciousness. So the actual ceremony is all about getting out the way and becoming empty and becoming the transparent vehicle, as Helen indicated again in the dervish posture. You're a transparent vehicle for consciousness, and it's coming in through your right hand, it's flowing through your transparent heart and out into the world through your left hand. So it's all about being a humble dervish and a transparent vehicle for oneness. And Helen tries to teach it to you as best she can, and everyone's got their own different abilities, physical abilities. Some of you will get amazing postures, indeed some of you already have. Others you'll struggle more, but that doesn't matter. You each do your best within your physical capabilities. And then, as Willem the last sheikh said, if you do that, then you get this amazing grace which comes down through the ceremony and through the tradition. So it's like you become a vehicle for this amazing force. And as I think I've mentioned before, sometimes on a Friday night, particularly before a guest Macabre, the house, I notice it's just full of love. It's like this amazing atmosphere descends on it. And then I think this is going to be a real thumper. And it always is. So it's an amazing thing. Don't underestimate this ceremony. It's very, very powerful. But that's more or less covered most of it, haven't I? Any questions? Yeah.
Do you know there is any relationship between the ceremony and the circular motion and wearing white and the Hajj ritual?
The ritual?
The Hajj.
The Hajj. Hajj.
The pilgrimage.
Pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yeah, because we do it in circular motion.
Yeah.
Counterclockwise, I think.
Yeah, we do it counterclockwise.
Yeah, everyone is wearing white.
Are they?
There's a connection?
I can't say because I'm not a Muslim.
Yeah.
But I only know that the white of the dervish robe represents the burial shroud, and the burial is the death of your ego, so it's the death of your sense of separation. And that's how it was always done, and that's how we were asked to preserve it. I know in some modern tekes in Turkey they have multicoloured dervishes, which is fine as a sort of visual treat for the audience, but it's not part of the original tradition. But I can't comment on Mecca, you'll know more about that.
During fourth Salam, what does Samazan Bashi do? You said something.
The Samazan Bashi stands where the sheikh used to stand. So there has to be someone there holding the stillness and also keeping an eye on you all. If one of you got into terrible trouble, got wound up in the curtains, for instance, the Samazambashi would come and help you. It has been known. There was one dervish in his coming out ceremony, he got tangled in the curtain. That was back in the 1960s, so don't worry. I'm sure it won't happen to you. So the Samazambashis it's all about looking after returners, isn't it? That's the Samazambashi's whole role. And even in the fourth salam, the Samazambashi is looking after you to make sure you're all okay.
How do you pronounce that?
Semazan, Sema means dance, Semazambashi means head, as in Bash Kazmat, so it's head dancer. Semazambashi. Then you've got the Nazambashi is the head nay player, and the Puddingzambashi is the head pudding maker. Or did I make that up? We used to have a lady called Sheila who was a good dervish, and she made these amazing puddings, so I christened her the Puddingzambashi.
So there are 4
Salams.
The first is around 7 minutes, the second was quick, around 3 minutes.
The first, they vary with different macabres, or that's different keys that the Mukabele are in. So sometimes we have one like Penchka we call the killer Mukabele. That's a very long one. We don't have that very often. Or Hazam is a bit of a killer, I think. But others like Ashim Ashiran's really short. So on average you're going to get about 8-9 minutes first salam.
8 to 10.
8 to 10. Second salam, some of them are quite long, some second salams. They can be 3 or 4 minutes, or they can be about 7 sometimes.
The average 5.
Yeah, average 5. Third salam, you're looking at about 12, 15 minutes.
Is this what we're going to do?
Yeah, yeah, just so you know.
Just,
You've seen the ceremony, so you've watched them doing it.
So in total.
and then the last one?
The last one's shorter, it's back to about 7, I think. 5 and 7. But the last one, I think the real one for surrender is the third one, because it's almost like that period in your life journey where you're about your age, 46, and you're about equidistant from the beginning and the end. So you're out in the drama of life. And by the time you get to the fourth salam, you're within sight at the end. So the first salam, you've got the energy of youth, you've just started. The fourth salam, you're thinking, well, I've only got a few more minutes and it'll all be over and I can rest on the floor. So they're very sort of well composed.
But there is a bit in the third salam where the music gets really quite fast. And it's at that point where it's the agony and the ecstasy. That's, if you can.
It's the letting go.
It's the letting go. It's the point where like, okay, I haven't really let go.
You let go into the music.
Yeah, and the music really helps because of the speed, and it's so painful. It's ecstatic. But you surrender. It's the point. I think it's the point. Like you've got your tenuray on. You're soaking wet. You're boiling hot. You're being cooked, and you just. I can't do this anymore. But something else comes in. It's like I think I said it in the class. If you can let go, the more effort, in a sense, and then the more you let go, something comes. It's like something comes to meet you and goes, okay then, I'll carry you. It's almost like, okay, I give up. I can't do it on my own. I give up. And something comes in and it starts to carry you. And it's almost like you don't feel like it's you doing it anymore. You're being turned. It's like an energy comes in, it's like... And it's really, really, really blissful.
Yeah, it's a great explanation. But it's very much like life. It's a metaphor for life.
You never close the eyes, right?
You never close. No. You can close the eyes when you're kneeling, when you're listening to the Naat or the Taksim. You can have, I normally do have my eyes closed. But when you're turning, your eyes are open. But because your eyes are loosely focused, they're just sort of, you don't have to eyeball your thumbnail, but you're loosely focused on it.
You're almost in a trance.
You're not in a trance, you're very wide awake, because you've got total awareness of where every dervish is around you. If you went in a trance, you'd lose that awareness. So it's like ultra wakefulness, if anything. But you're very still, because the movement causes your discursive mind to shut down. So you're still thinking, but you're thinking, lift the foot up, bring it up to the knee, put it down, toe forward, arms up, arms back. There's so much, don't bump into that dervish, don't bump into that dervish. There's so much to attend to, but it cuts off, all of your day-to-day life disappears just because there's one point of attention on the dance. And that's the point where Helen mentioned that often a transcendence takes place, where even that falls away and it's like you're just being turned.
But when you're in that transcendent state,
Yeah.
and you're going at a fast speed,
Yeah.
and you let go, that sounds to me like you're not 100.
No, you're totally in it. You're
Totally
totally there, totally wide awake. You're more wide awake. You're more aware. But it's almost, I remember Macabre when Dr. Rolls died, and I was turning in the third salam, and it was absolute heaven. It was almost like there was a sort of, you were a puppet being held up by, your arms were being held up by strings. Because the morning, one I'd done in the morning was absolute murder. We all know about murderous Mukabele. And this time it's just, it was, I can't describe it, it was like the whole room was fit with love. And it's almost like turning in a jelly made of love, which is holding everything up. And so everything is just exactly where everything should be, and you know where everything is. And yet you're witnessing the whole thing happening from this point of stillness.
This happened after you received
After?
you received that Dr. Oz has just died.
Yeah, that's when it happened.
And his
That-
spirit was.
Yeah, it was. I thought, because someone before the ceremony said to me, is Dr. Roll still alive? And I said, yes, I think he is, because we'd know. And at the end I said to her, he's okay, he's died now. And you get that, I'll get you in a minute, you get that when a turner dies, and you have the first ceremony after their death, very often you get that same thing, don't you? Not always. Very often. Raoul.
I was wondering, you know when one of the salam finishes, everyone stops and then like they kind of waddle along like penguins.
Yeah.
Does that mean anything? Like
They're sort of, when the music suddenly stops, you almost do a sort of little bow. You don't really do a proper bow till the shake bows, but you need to steady yourself. If you've been going fast, boom, suddenly you stop. And you huddle together. Helen will show you how. So where you stop, there'll be dervishes stopped around you, and you all huddle together, and you sort of hold each other up. And then, once the Samazambashi comes out, the minute the Samazambashi moves, all the dervishes, except the one who's nearest to the Samazambashi, the one here, they stay exactly where they are, they don't move an inch. But all the others, you hurry round. So you don't amble round. Some dervishes tend to sort of amble along, trying to look cool. You don't. You hurry, because you're dying to turn again.
You might not feel like it.
You might not feel like it, but technically you're dying to turn again. So the thing you described as waddling like a penguin is actually the dervishes walking very quickly round back to that point to get out and turn again.
so when they're standing together, it's kind of to help each other.
It's to help each other. You're often, you can sort of sense if some of the dervish next to you is having a really difficult time. Often you'll see dervishes will sort of put their arm on them, and you're just. It's like the whole of your training by the end, it's like the sort of bonding you might get of soldiers in combat, for instance, or people who climb K2 together. You've gone on this amazing journey all together, and you've all suffered together, and you've all sort of come through it out the other end, and you have this great bond.
I sort of feel that at the end, when the post is taken by the Samazimbashi, and everybody's gone, and we're just sort of left there alone as these sort of lovers with nobody to love, because it's all gone. I just find that really sad.
That's an amazing moment, because you've got such stillness in that room when the dervishes have gone.
There's such a connection between those who are turning and those who are sort of...
The audience are called lovers, and the audience are an integral part of the ceremony. They're not just watching the ceremony, they're part of the ceremony. And as you turn past them, you can feel the love coming off them. And as the shape, you can see them, you can see who's engaged and who's secretly trying to watch Netflix on their iPhone.
So you do feel that exchange, because it's quite profound. You're sitting and watching and feeling turn, but you feel it.
You feel it as a turner. You feel it from the audience, and you can see who's engaged and who isn't.
You'll know when you pass Annie. You know, because she often sits in the front row. I'm like, there's Annie. And you actually feel Annie, because you can feel Annie loving you as you whirl past her. I've been whirling past her for nearly 20 years.
So when you turn, you feel the observer is like...
Yeah.
You do feel who's connected to you?
Yeah, because they're part of it.
And in our graduation, I think you were saying earlier that we'll be interspersed with more experienced learners. So how many people will be in our graduation?
It depends how many. In the olden days, we used to be very selective and just select a few people who had helped on the training to turn with the newer ones. But nowadays, we invite everyone, I think. The biggest graduation ceremony we had was about 5 years ago. That was 43 dervishes out on the floor at once.
27 chickpeas.
Yeah, 27 chickpeas, plus the old ones made 43. So the sheikh bowed in through the right line of dervishes, because they went all the way around that other wall.
I was going to say, isn't it going to be a lot more difficult when there are more people? Cause
No, you'll get used to it. You've got a few weeks to go yet. You're not quite there yet. But
I know I'm not quite there.
the size of our regular dervish group differs, because people go off and live in different countries and things. So at the moment, our core group of dervishes, I would say, though we could probably muster about 25, we're more like about 16. So if you add 16 to your 16, that makes 32.
I won't be that big.
It won't be that big. Yours probably be about 22, I would think. Nice number, because you get supported, and also it's great. I used to love being in the inner circle, because you feel the audience can't see you.
Hiding.
You're hiding.
Between the experienced and...
Yeah.
Can I
You can volunteer. You can bag it. You bribe the Amazon back.
But it is sometimes quite difficult to recognise people when they're turning. You can't always work out.
No, who's
who
who?
it is.
That's because you're meant to be invisible as a person, really.
I once saw Mukabele where someone was actually slap bang in the middle. But
That happens when they get lost normally.
oh, okay.
What did you say?
I saw Mukabele here where the person was one person right in the middle.
Oh, just
That's technically not right, but what happens sometimes in a big Macabre is someone loses their way and they just end up turning on one place in the middle, so that's the best place for them to be in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually what kind of struggle can we experience except like ending up in the curtains? So like this would be what, like getting lost?
Curtains has only happened once.
But like anything like what you just said, maybe getting lost or I don't know.
That will happen in your training, you'll get lost, but Helen will show you. The role of the Samas and Bashi is they herd you along. So if you get out of your circle, Helen will come up and she'll get very close to you and she'll, by her presence, she'll push you back into the circle you're meant to be in. But you'll probably do, all of you will do that at the beginning. You'll forget, you'll get lost where you're meant to be. But that's all part of the learning process. But gradually as time goes on, you'll find it much easier to find your place. It's sort of like learning to drive a car in traffic. When you first learn to drive, eventually it becomes completely second nature and you know how wide your car is and how much space you've got.
So do people fall over?
In the ceremony it's incredibly rare. There was one lady did it not a few years back and I just told her she needed to come to practices more. But I've only known about 2 fallings over in the actual ceremony. But even if you do it, it doesn't matter. Nothing really matters. You do your best. But it's very rare.
And what you saw, that experience, was it because of a loss of balance or just like bumping into like the next...
In that case, it was someone who had learnt who then immediately went off for a long time and didn't practice, and then came straight back into the ceremony with no practice and just had no balance and no technique. So once you finish your training, either you can say, I don't want anything more to do with these people and I'm out of here, which is absolutely fine. Or if you think, oh, I'd really like to carry on turning in this, then you have to doggedly keep going at it. So especially for the first year, because it's like learning to ride a bicycle, it's Helen's building you up to this amazing level of fitness. And by the time you have your graduation ceremony, it won't be a problem holding your arms up, because they'll be so strong. But you can lose that very quickly if you don't keep at it and practice. Then later on, we have people who trained and turned for a couple of years and then went off and raised a family with 3 children, and then 15 years later came back and just picked it up again. But you have to do that initial bit. If you want to continue, you've got to peg away at it, because that's like a continuation of the training, and then it will become natural, and then you can leave it and come back to it. But don't book 6 months away after your graduation, or you'll lose that. Guaranteed. It all just depends what you want to do, really. But for some people, it's just enough to have done the training. Others, it's their destiny to be long-term dervishes. And others of you, suddenly your life pulls you off somewhere. You find your destiny is in another country or something.
Could you say a bit more about the who?
Who? It's just all the names of God rolled into one, which I don't know how that works. So it's a bit like the sort of Islamic version of Om, I guess.
Also, I was taught, by that point in the ceremony, you've turned through 4 salams and you've become a transparent vehicle, and it's a bit like you've become a hollow reed, and so it's because you have to breathe in before you sound who. So you take a big in breath, so it's like a breath, a pure breath being poured through you, and it comes out of you like the note of a note. It's almost like you've become the hollow reed.
That's a nice explanation.
Yeah.
Can you actually join another group if you are moving to another country, if they are trained in the
Yeah,
same way?
yeah.
Does that happen?
Yeah, most definitely. We have
Terry.
turners we've trained who have gone across and then joined Mevlevi groups in Turkey. Or we've got one turner who turns with us who's trained in Turkey and now lives in London. So he comes, what's his name? Zafar. He comes and turns regularly with us. So we've also got, there's a teke in New Zealand, and there's a couple of tekes in Mexico, and there's one down in Brazil, I think. And so you're welcome, if you're travelling, to go and join another teke if they'll have you. Anyone which is within our sort of umbrella, which is New Zealand and Mexico and Brazil, will definitely have you. If you go across and visit Turkey, you'll need to talk to someone like Zafar, and they'd probably arrange it with their shape for you to turn with them. But we're all good friends, hopefully. We don't squabble. We don't say we're the best teke. You're not a proper teke. Right.
I never thought I would say this, but I'm starting to get anxiety about losing the nail.
Oh yes, I told you you would.
I'm wondering whether you could continue practicing with it after we
No, you can't. Once you're off the nail, you can never ever go back on the nail. The only person who can go back on the nail is the teacher in order to demonstrate it. So that's why I said to you, I think I said it to you, disbelief, most people miss that
And
one.
I adamantly said, there's no way I'm going to miss
Yeah, you do miss it, but you'll get used to not having it as well.
But the reason why I'm raising it now is particularly because I'm feeling like I could do with perhaps a
More
longer
long.
period of time.
Helen will know how long you need on it, and different people get slightly different lengths on it. So she'll know if you need a bit longer on it. You'll find you won't know what the other dervishes are doing, but some of them might already not be turning on nails. And so if she'll look after you, don't worry. You'll get as much nail as you need.
You can fix the nail also. Like, glue it to your toes while turning.
You can often imagine you're on the nail.
Yeah.
Helen will say, you'll say in the later stage for training, imagine the nail.
I still do, even in turning practice. Sometimes I think, okay, just imagine the nails between my big toe and my second toe. And I often use that as an image for demos for people who are coming to slow turn. Just imagine you've got the nail between your toes and really let your foot caress the floor and make a complete circle. And you find that's really good for you to hold a still point. And yes, I will when we do, particularly when you're in the fourth salon, because the fourth salon, as Philip said, you turn on place. And that's actually harder, that fourth salon, staying on place, to the point where really imagine you've got that nail there to hold you in, to not start moving around the room.
Any more? Yeah.
Do we know actually where this form, the Mukabele is done now, where it comes from?
Do we know who made our form? It was basically Sultan Ballet, who was Rumi's son. So he introduced a sort of final bit, which was the processing. So that's called the Sultan Ballet work. So it goes back about 750 years. And our role was to preserve it in its original form. So that was our promise to Mr. Reswi, that we wouldn't change it. And me in my position, I'm just following my instructions and doing that. Sometimes people have told me off because they want to change bits of it, or But I say, if you want to be in this group, this is what we promised to do, so this is what we do. So that's our promise to Mr. Rezui, is to, because he wanted that form, the original form, which sort of ended in 1925 when Kemal Ataturk bound them all. He wanted that. He thought it was so valuable that it needed preserving.
3 questions.
Yeah.
So when we wash, do we also wash our face and hands or arms?
I was never taught to. Helen, what do you teach?
I teach you because that's what Alice taught me.
Okay. I was taught it was just the feet, but Helen was taught it was the face and hands and the feet. So.
And the other. So why do we kiss the floor? What does that mean?
With the kissing the floor, you kiss everything in the ceremony, because everything is God at the end of the day. So you're acknowledging the divine in absolutely everything, and the floor is allowing you to turn. So you're thanking the floor, not only for being God, but for letting you turn on it. So it's like, then you kiss, as you put your robes on, all your robes, you kiss them. When you put your turning shoes on, you kiss them. So it's all thanking the thing for letting you turn and acknowledging the divine in everything. And number 3,
What the sealing the feet?
sealing the feet. Helen, you explain the sealing.
I'll do it in the next lesson.
Okay.
Partly it's because it's showing that you're a sort of a vehicle, but there's more significance to it than that, which Helen will explain to you.
Next lesson or the one after?
Any more? One more?
Do we bow at the beginning of entering the room in the training? Or
You don't have to do that, I don't think. No, because some people, people get a bit fanatical and carried away, and every time they go into a turning practice, they bow in and they bow out. You don't have to do that at all. And at the end of the turning practice, incidentally, Mr. Rezui never wanted people to go down and kiss the floor. He just wanted them. You'll notice the practice taker just bows and then walks off, and older turners will just bow and then walk off. But because some people get very tired, they actually want to go down and have a quiet time. So that's fine, they can if they want to.
Very similar to that subject. When we take the salt and we kiss it, and then we go to our board, are we supposed to bow before we kiss the layer? Because I do that.
Yeah, that's fine. I can't. I would have to really look somewhere to find out the exact. If you actually bow on the board before you bow, go on your knees, kiss the nail, speak to the soul.
Well, that's what I thought we had to do, but I'm not sure if I missed that. I don't know.
You'll be bowing. You will be bowing in the ceremony a lot. Actually, because it's interesting, because one woman at the end of her training, when she decided she didn't want to be a dervish, she said, I can't stand all this bowing and kissing.
Right.
And I thought, you've been watching this ceremony for a year, why did you not think there would be bowing and kissing? You know, it's a lot of bowing and kissing, but it teaches you about how to be humble, how to see God in everything, and how to surrender. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter exactly how many times you do it, but if that's what it does, isn't it? It's just how we let go. Which actually, I think, is symbolic of what Philip said about the third salah. I think by the time there is everybody reaches some point in their life where they will be brought to their knees, and you suddenly go, oh my God, I didn't expect this to happen. I give up, I surrender. Please God, help me. That's what life does to us. And I think when life does that to you, you end up coming to a ceremony like this and go, okay, I want to surrender. That was my experience. I can't do this on my own anymore. And I think what you learn, like the secret in that is God comes back to you. and says you're not alive.
I think that's probably about it. Next week's your last meeting, because then things hot up on the dervish floor and it takes a bit longer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.